How's it going, my comic gentlemen? We're here today with Thomas Doherty, the creator and writer of Tales of the Asylum and Nera,
Yep. Well, I don't write Nera. I'm the publisher of Nera. So,
publisher of Nera.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So I have many hats that fit on this little head that go there. Yeah. So I'm pretty much the publisher of Committed Comics, the editor in chief, the janitor, the web designer. Actually, I can take web designer off my plate now. I actually just hired a web designer, so I don't have to do it anymore.
So, are you taking submissions?
So yeah, so we take submissions. That's a wonderful process as well. So I've made this point and I stick to it, even though now I seem to be a dinosaur in this world. With submissions, I do not take digital submissions. All the submissions have to be printed out, mailed to me, and with our mailing address and that kind of stuff. And the reason for that is because it becomes way too simple and way too easy nowadays for someone to say, "Hey, look at my Instagram. Hey, look at my website. Hey, look at my DeviantArt. Hey, look at the." Okay, what effort did you put in?
Right.
If you want me to stop what I'm doing, or not stop what I'm doing, but at least sit there and take the time out to actually review and critique and see, do I want to publish this person? If you literally just hit send, and 99.8% of the time, it's a copy and paste line to me. It's, I want to be an interior artist. Here is my portfolio. It's at no point is it like, "Hello, Tom, how are you? I saw your website. I did the research." No, it's, I saw your Instagram. I saw that you're a publisher from another field book or something like that, and so I'm sending you this generic email. So at least at that point, if somebody takes the time to print out the stuff, I will take the time to look at it, and spend it. Because again, what is it? It's going to cost you, even if you send it priority mail, $8.
Right.
So you don't believe in your desire to get into the business? It's not worth $8 to you? Or let's round it up to 10 with the cost of copies.
Yep.
Okay.
So
every person who I take on is, before we even print the book, before we even finish the book, it's roughly about a $3,000 investment for me in terms of time and money. So you can't spend $10? No.
Right. Yeah. So you can get them into Diamond and all the good stuff.
So in the past, so we've been around. Committed Comics has been around for 20 years now, or over 20 years.
Nice.
We started in '99. We took a couple years off, and then in the mid 2010s timeframe, we've had books in Diamond for multiple issues and that kind of stuff. So one of our early books, Java, Neo Dawn, God Among Men, Haunted Refrain, those are all in Diamond. Then when we took time off, and I want to say it was around like 2012 time frame, just took some time off to restructure the company, to kind of regroup and that kind of stuff. When I came back to Diamond, they were like, "Oh, you have to resubmit everything because we haven't carried you in a couple of, like 2 years." So I'm like, "Really? Like, I literally did like 14 projects for you guys, like 14 different individual issues. Like, I got to okay." So I sent it into them and just got the consistent runaround. And this was all pre-pandemic. And then the last actual phone conversation I had with Diamond was around 2017, I want to say. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about Diamond. I'm just going to go. That was the first time I was kind of leaning into Kickstarter and crowdfunding, and so I was like, oh, let me just try this market, because that's a totally different model. And then, so I printed the book, was basically going to start doing the convention circuit. And this was, 2018, 2019 rolls around. We all know what pretty much happened there, boys and girls, it's so I haven't reapproached, and again, during the pandemic, because that's also when, Lunar popped up and Penguin and, all these other alternatives now. It's no longer just Diamond, which is funny because when I was a retailer in the early 90s, we had 4 distributors back then too. So it was like the concept of having multiple distributors now doesn't faze me, because that's actually how I started in the comic book world.
Yeah. So,
like, really, guys?
So when Diamond has like leftover product, do they just keep it or do they send it back?
So the way Diamond works is that this is one of the reasons why it's very tricky if you're going to do a monthly book through Diamond or through any distributor. Is they everything that's solicited through Diamond is roughly about 2 months in advance, right? So if I'm looking to ship a book in January, I'm going to be in the October previews
Right.
with a final order cutoff date of early November, right? Diamond then sends those numbers to me. Then I go to print, and then I send them the order, usually plus 10%. I'll send to them. So that's one of the reasons why it's very harrowing, and why I give Marvel and DC and any other company that's doing monthly books a tremendous amount of respect. And those artists and writers and colorists and letters, and like, oh my lord, I know the headache that goes into that, because you literally have 15 to 16 days to turn everything around.
Yep.
You know, you have to do it, and it's kind of interesting because that's one of the deciding factors in my mind of why book page count keeps shrinking. It's because the art now is also being done to a different level, with the realism and the super amount of detail. I mean, you look at somebody like, Joe Staton, who did Green Lantern back in the late '80s, early '90s, and you look at David Finch. They're both incredible artists in completely different ways. But David's lines, I guarantee you, take more time than Joe's lines.
Yeah.
So, like, that has to be factored into things, right? And so usually what I did back then was I would go and get the projects done. We were doing miniseries at the time, and so I would actually require 2 issues to be done out of a 3 to 4 issue miniseries. So you had to have those done on disc to me before I'd even start the solicitation process with Diamond. So when you solicit something to a distributor, you're doing it 4 months in advance of when you want the street date to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I would send stuff to them again for a January timeframe. I'm sending it to them, what is that, June or July, timeframe, to make sure it gets. So like that's how far out you have to be, which for us wasn't that bad because, like I said, we were doing miniseries, and I required majority of it to be done, if not all of it to be done. So it was a little bit easier for me to be like, okay, on the calendar, we got this one, and we got this one, and then we're good, But that also was one of the reasons why there was roughly like a 3-year gap between issues on one of our books, because I didn't have that 3rd issue done, and the artist decided to go MIA on me for a while, disappear. And so, yeah. So, I mean, we've had distribution before, we've had challenges. I'm actually going to be approaching Lunar because my understanding at one point Lunar was by invitation only. You had to talk to one of their reps had to basically find you and talk to you. Now my understanding is that they have a glass door policy to where you can see through the door. It's not quite an open door policy, but it's a glass door, so you can see through it. And so, yeah, so I've gotten a couple communications from people who have given me, avenues to go down. So, I'll see. And again, I'll probably also send to the Diamond as well. I mean, the last time I had issued, all the stuff with Diamond, it's I sent them 4 different packages over the span of, I want to say, 5 months to 4 different reps. And every single time they would lose the package, and or the rep got fired and decided to just throw his desk away, to the point where, I mean, and literally one of the projects that we were trying to send in was our project God Among Men, which was an 80-page graphic novel, self-contained, beautifully drawn, amazingly racing story. That one of the purchasers at Diamond had stopped by our table at San Diego, picked up the book because we had already had it printed, flipped through it and said, "Wow, this looks great." I said, "Okay, well, it's going to be on your desk by the time you get back to the office." And he was like, "Oh, cool." And so and then after that time frame, after like the first couple of months, I just tried a different project because I'm like, okay, maybe they don't want that project. So I sent them the first issue of Nira X that we were the newest publishers for, because she's a character that's been around for 30 years. She's been in Diamond. She's had, best-selling books in Diamond and that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, this is somebody who has a track record, has proven sales, that kind of. I'll send this into them. Radio silence. I sent it in
Mm.
again. I sent in a third package with both of the books to them. Nothing. And then I finally called up because, again, I know a couple of those people who work over at Diamond, and I called somebody who was a little bit higher up on the scale, and he pretty much said, well, at this point in time, there's really no interest in 90s nostalgia.
Uh,
That was like, are you sure about that? Because that's everything that everyone's doing right now.
yeah,
I'm
right.
going to send it into them. So that was his subtle way of basically saying, like, look, we just lost your package again, and I don't want to admit it. Like, that was his.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, it is what it is. I understand these guys have a lot on their plates. So I'm not going to sit there and be like, it's a personal vendetta. But maybe it is. I don't know.
So did you go from comic shop owner to comic book creator?
No, well, sort of. So I was a manager of a couple different stores in New York. I grew up in New York. And I had, again, one of the great things about the New York area, even if you're outside of the city, is that you have a lot of everything. So, like, I had 3 different local comic stores that I could go to, whereas I talk to people now and they're like, oh, yeah, I have one and it's 25 minutes away. And I'm like, oh, that's, it's like, oh, I feel so bad for you, And
Yeah.
the stores that I had back in the day, I had like Frontline Collectibles and Amazing Tales and Dragon's Den. I mean, these are all like in the New York, Westchester area. These are all like historic stores because they're, everybody's known. They were all there for like 30 plus years, when they closed up and that kind of stuff. And so I managed and I consulted with a bunch of those stores. And then eventually in 98, me and my friend Alex were sitting there complaining about the comic book industry. Cause I don't know if you remember back in the late 90s were not exactly the greatest time for comic books. It was kind of the glut. Marvel had declared bankruptcy, Image, the shine of Image had worn off, and now they were just not being able to deliver books on time, not finish miniseries, so we were sitting there complaining about it, and my roommate at the time, John, just literally turns around and he's like, will you shut up or do something about it? He's like, you're sitting here complaining, but you're not doing anything. And I'm like, oh, he's got a point. Like, you kind of can't really complain. I mean, that is what the internet is. But, if you're going to complain about something, you should try to make it better. So, there's less to complain about. And again, I was very fortunate. I had friends who worked at different comic book companies. I had a friend who worked at Marvel. I had a friend who did freelance work at DC. I had a friend who was an intern at Valiant that I would go and hang out in the Valiant offices.
That's cool.
Because again, those were all right in Manhattan, and I lived in Westchester County, which was about a 40-minute train ride into the city. So it's like, okay, yeah, when I would ditch school, I would just go down there and hang out. And so I kind of knew a lot of different artists and creators, and I was like, well, why don't I try to do something? So I communicated with them, talked to a couple of different people, and they're like, oh, you know what? I don't want to do anything, but I know this guy, who's been working on his own project forever and that kind of stuff. And, oh, these other 2 guys. So we put out, so we started off with a couple of local people to the, New York, Manhattan area, which is, fairly large footprint for local. And then we did a couple of different small shows, and then we actually set up at San Diego Comic-Con. I want to say, was that 2000 or 2001 was our first one? I'm trying to remember. It all just kind of blurs at some point in time into one giant memory.
Mm-hmm.
But we set up, and we had a couple people already that we had. I think we had found each other via, Facebook and some message boards. And people, said, oh yeah, I've got my own creator-owned project, or I want to do something. And that was one of the things we wanted to do. We definitely wanted to have a company project as well as creator-owned projects. So the original plan and goal was, I'm going to have this company book that will be the mission statement for the company, which was to blend professionals with amateurs. So first timers and veterans in the industry kind of feeding off each other, and having the veterans kind of, give information to the newbies and that kind of stuff. But then I also wanted to have creator-owned projects because I was a huge believer in creator-owned stuff, and I'm a big fan of it. I mean, some of my favorite books, back during that time frame was like ElfQuest and like, Hellboy had come out and, and different, Madman and, Concrete. I mean, it's like I was a huge Dark Horse fan, and Dark Horse built their entire company on creator-owned projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of wanted to do the same thing, but with a little bit of a twist of, blending. Like those are all creator-owned projects from people who had been in the industry or just, were very lucky. They'd either been in the industry for years or they got lucky and captured lightning in a bottle. And so I kind of wanted to, kind of give a little bit of a roadmap for that. So we went to San Diego. I did portfolio reviews for the 4 days that were there, met a tremendous amount more people. And this is when 10 by 10s were affordable, and you didn't have to, sacrifice, a virgin to the gods of Comic-Con and rob a bank at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. We did that for like 3 or 4 years, and it was a lot of fun. I think we might have produced one project during that entire time. The first couple of years of the company, it was a different world, right? It was Wild West for us. We didn't really know what we were doing. Although thankfully, I did have people who were in the comic industry who I could rely on, and got some great information and got some great advice from people. And then I'm trying to remember what year it was. It must have been. It was when it was one of the first comic shows at the Javits Center. So I want to say it was like 97 or 98 or something like that. Because it was while I was still living in New York, and I moved out to the West Coast. I moved out to Seattle in basically early 2000. So
okay,
or late 99, I think it was. So it must have been like 97, like winter of 97 or something. After my roommate had yelled at us to start our own company, and we were kind of formulating it. But it was one of the first shows at the Javits Center, but it was also like a giant snowstorm. So it like literally shut down. Nobody could get into the city. All the guests that were there, they were pretty much there because their hotel was across the street. and that was it. And so me and my business partner, Alex, we were stupid and we trudged through the snow, knee-high snow to get there. And we were like one of like 200 people in the entire Javits Center who made it to the show. And so I got the opportunity to talk to a lot of legends in the industry about starting my own company, because I think at this point it was just percolated in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the opportunity to talk to Jim Shooter for like an hour because there was nobody there at the show.
Right.
So I got to talk to him, and he at this point I believe he'd already left. Obviously, already left Valiant. I think he had already closed up shop on Defiant, and he was working on Broadway Comics. Or it was right after Broadway Comics. Like, I'm trying to remember. So I just remember talking to him a lot about Defiant, because that was like one of my favorite comic companies in terms of the stories that were told, in terms of the creativity, in terms of the artwork, and all of those books and the innovation of Warriors of Plasm. Even though people like, they'll joke about it now and they'll poop all over it and that kind of stuff. But it's like, no, what they were doing with Defiant with card set, I mean, making the comic book out of cards, and they forced you to buy boxes and cases of these cards, and then you had to buy a book to put them in, and then they released them all in a giant tin 3 times. They knew exactly what they were doing. So it's like thankfully I got to talk to him for a long period of time, and so again we did all this stuff. We went to San Diego, and ironically, like majority of the people that we started the company with, we never actually published any of their books.
Okay.
Just because again, I mean, this is what happens when you want to work with people who have no or minimal experience in the comic industry. Everybody wants to be creative. Everyone wants to do this. It takes a whole lot. I learned that the hard way with writing my own book, Tales from the Asylum, which is planned to be a 4-issue miniseries, and I was writing issue 1 and 2, and it was taking me forever. And the on-running joke was like, "Wow, this is harder than it looks," kind of deal. Because I had been dealing with writers and creators and writer artists for 20 plus years at that point. But mostly it was because I had been working with those people. That's what was throwing me off. I was being the editor, the art director, and the writer at the same time. And there's a reason why those are usually 3 different people. Because if you don't, you end up trying to run a 3-legged man race with 6 legs all tied together. It's like, yeah, if you have 6 legs, you could run real fast, but not if you're stepping on top.
Right.
So that's kind of what I did. But So I mean, it's very difficult, and I got a lot of advice, and I'm very thankful for the people I know, and I'm thankful for the people who I started with. I mean, even though some of them have only done one story for us or one cover or something like, I got to work with people like Dustin Weaver, who is doing amazing things over at Image with his series Packlists, and he's worked with Matt Fraction, and done tons of stuff on X-Men and that kind of stuff, and Camilla D'Erico, and Philip Sablik, who is like I want to say he might be just a straight up publisher of Boom now. Like he literally just worked his way all the way up there. You know, it's
Where
crazy.
can everybody find you? What's your what social medias are you on?
So the website is committedcomics.com. So COMMITTED
Okay.
comics, COMICS, 2 M's, 2 T's. That is getting an overhaul. It should have a new, fresh, fancy new look within the next kind of week or two. And then social media is committed.comics. That's Instagram, and then just Committed Comics on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it nowadays. I have no idea. It was we had started an Instagram account with just Committed Comics at one point, and then the person who started that was helping me out with that disappeared. I don't have the login for that. It's been sitting there. Nothing's changed on it. Nothing's been posted on it for like 9 years now or 10 years. And I've emailed Instagram and I'm like, that's me. Can I have it? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
So,
Is there anything you want to say before we go? 20 minutes flies by, doesn't it?
So, I know, right? I babble a lot. So basically, like I mentioned before, we are the newest publisher for Nira X. So she's a character that's been around for over 30 years. We are going to be having a Kickstarter coming up for the next issue, for the second issue of the second miniseries that we're producing for Bill Mouse, the creator. So that is going to go live on February 18th. That's my hope. You can also go to the Committed Comics website, and then we also have a mailing list sign-up page because I haven't got everything approved for Kickstarter yet. And that is just tinyurl.com/ NXDS2. So Nira X Dark Seas 2, which is the miniseries. Yeah. So I'm assuming this will all be typed out somewhere on the listing, which
it'll all be in the description.
Which is always helpful because I'm actually hoping by that point, maybe by the time this goes live, the pre-launch page will be up. But so I'm in the process of just basically closing out Tales from the Asylum. That's going to be available on the website early March for order, or you can find us at any of the shows that we're going to be at around the country. We do San Diego every year. I'm going to be in Atlanta in early February, or the second week of February, because we're in early February right now. Second weekend of February. And then I'm going to be in Salt Lake, Seattle area, a couple different other shows. I usually do about 6 conventions around the country a year. So, but it'll all be listed on our committedcomics.com website. That's kind of like the nice hub to get everything for us.
Fine.
But yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to come talk with me.
Yep. I love talking about myself. It's the best topic ever.
Thank you.
All right, man.
What? Bye. You mean you haven't subscribed to Comicchatauthority? Oh, come on. Subscribe already. What are you waiting for? It's no big deal. Like, man, don't forget to tell him to hit that like button. Yeah, that too. Just subscribe.